the war ended.
Yeah.
So then I got into the space program, and I was too valuable.
Yeah.
But I could have gone to Vietnam in F-18s, but I'd promised my family I would retire and go a second career, which I did.
Yeah.
That's when I had been in the space program for 15 years at Northrop at NASA.
Yeah.
And that was high adventure and a few moments of terror when we lost them. And I remember I just retired when they lost the one on takeoff where the O-rings didn't fit. We knew that.
Right.
We knew the O-rings didn't fit, and we had tested those tapes, and I couldn't believe they were going to launch it with things hanging on it. So anyway, but my war was I was a native of South Carolina.
Yeah.
And this was the day I left to go into the Army Air Corps. But I'd had 1 year at Clemson. And Clemson, ROTC, my dad had been a second lieutenant in World War I. But that only lasted 2 years.
Right.
And he didn't even get overseas.
Right.
But he had all his artifacts and stuff.
Wow.
And so I was going to be in the Army. But then my buddies at Clemson were going into the Army Air Corps, and I love flying. I'd never flown, but I used to watch the planes till they were out of sight.
Yeah.
And I would, so then when they started going in as a cadet, away I went. And so I went to Gulfport Field for basic training, and then they sent you to college. I think A&M was one of the college training detachments. I went to Morningside in Sioux City, Iowa.
Now, what year was it?
This is all happening in I went in August of '43, and by let's see, by the time we went to Morningside, and then I went to gunnery school, classification center. That's right, at California in about December of '43. And like many, I qualified for bombardier, navigator, and pilot. But they had most of the pilots, so that if you qualified for navigator, you went to that. And I was glad to, because I'd never flown. We'll never know if I'd have made a pilot then. But I went on into gunnery school at Kingman, Arizona, and got gunnery wings, and then went to navigation school in Louisiana, and graduated at the ripe old age of 19 at 28th October '44.
Right.
And so I then went to the plane I wanted to go to, the B-17 at Tampa, Florida. We were forming up there. And I had a crew, let's see, this crew, somewhere in this mess. I have to handle Christmas and birthdays for my wife. She can't write. She's beautiful. Let's see. What was I thinking of there? The crew. Yeah. And my picture of the crew is in here. Oh yeah, here we are. There's my bomber crew. And see, there's a replica up there of the same type.
Right.
And my bomb group was famous, and so they made a lot of models.
Yeah.
It flew 258 missions in World War II. And somewhere in there, I think the arrow points to a young 20-year-old at that time.
I'm still looking for the arrow. Oh, wait, here we go. Right there. Okay, right front first row. There you go. Okay, there you go. Yeah. Okay.
So, anyway, it's interesting. So when the war was over, we did what we call Cook's tours, and we took our ground people on these trains all over Europe to show what we'd been beaten up.
Right.
That was high adventure, and usually half of them got sick because it was low level, but it was like a really wild over the Rhine River. There'd be planes coming and going, showing the people what we did. Anyway.
So you flew in Europe, but after the war?
No, I flew 6 combat missions.
6 combat missions in Europe?
In Europe.
Yeah.
And,
where were you stationed?
At between Cambridge and Ipswich, a place called Rattleston. And let's see, this is the list of.
Now, you were a navigator?
And I was a navigator.
Okay.
And I had 2 guns up front on swivelable guns.
Right.
And let's see, they kept a record of your combat. Where is that?
So you were in the nose?
Yeah, in the nose of the B-17.
Right.
And where is my little card of missions? Oh, yeah, here we go.
Oh, that's your mission.
This is the missions, and then I had pictures after the war. They gave strike photo pictures. And so the first one is the only one they didn't have, and that was a mission to Berlin. And you were put on experienced crews. Each one of your 10 people were on different crews. So I was in this plane here. Oh, that's the first mission, and it was it's called the Berlin mission, but our target was a jet fighter base at Brandenburg, the gateway to Berlin.
Right.
So we had 1,400 bombers and 800 fighter escort, and I worried more about running into somebody else. But my duty as a navigator, when we took off, we had our spot. We took off, and we had a low-frequency beacon called a buncher beacon. And you flew to the buncher beacon, and I would tell my pilot what heading, and for 1 minute, and I'd say turn, home in. And we kept a racetrack pattern, and it was really beautiful when you got above the overcast. You see planes just popping out all over that area.
Yeah.
And then you found your lead ship and formed up. So I was very important on the assembly to tell my pilot to home in and then turn, time to a minute, and home back in until you kept going. And if everybody did it right, nothing would happen. But every once in a while you'd feel, whoop, and somebody from another group just nearly hit us. But it didn't happen actually. Now, once you did that, you began to form the whole group of 36 airplanes, 9 ships in each squadron. And you headed out for your target. And my first one, of course, I flew with Bob Glazner of Beaumont, Texas, who passed away 3 or 4 years ago. But surprisingly, my wife was walking the street for a political campaign. You know Geraldine Hester, the black lady? Geraldine was running for... So Paige and she were walking neighbors and rang a doorbell, and it was a lady named Glazner. And I said, do you happen to know Bob Glazner? And she said, yes, he's my brother. And I said, well, is he still making it? Yep. And so we had a reunion at San Antonio, and he was there.
I'll be darned.
But then he passed on later.
Yeah.
But he was just like an old mother hen.
Right.
So anyway, we were number 2 plane. Now, if this plane had got shot down, we would have been the leader, and there'd have been on my first mission.
You'd have been in the lead
as
of
a
the lead.
navigator, leading the whole dadgum group. So that was really interesting that they didn't touch us. The fighters, we saw the jets come up, they hit the group ahead, down with the one, over here, down with another, and over the top, no threat.
Yeah.
It was so fast. I later ran into a pilot at one of these Confederate Air Force reunions who was from Canada and the Luftwaffe. And I said, where were you stationed? He said, at Brandenburg. I said, Brandenburg? We bombed there the 10th of April. He said, I know. I was trying to get my jet, and I ran out in the woods because the bombs were falling, and one squadron hit in the woods. They missed the target, and he said, how the hell did they know we were out here?
Oh, my goodness.
So anyway, we shook hands, and we said, we're glad we didn't get each other.
Yeah.
Because
and where did you meet up with him?
At an air show at probably Harlingen. Harlingen. We used to have the big air show there, and then it moved to Brownsville, and then it's now Midland. Why would you want to go to Midland on a vacation? You just stop to refuel on the way to El Paso. But anyway, that was interesting. On my very first mission, that suddenly I could have been in a very important place. But anyway, it didn't happen, thank goodness.
Did y'all get any flak?
Oh, yes, there was flak all around.
Yeah.
And I saw flak hit a P-51 escort, and it just bits and pieces. And I saw another B-17 just spinning down like in the movies. But I thought that was the way it was every time. When I got back, they said, boy, that was a rough one. Oh, really? I didn't know any better. and I was impregnable. I wasn't married, and I really think back now, boy, my folks must have been really worried and praying and everything, but I was confident they wouldn't touch me. And here I am.
Yeah.
But anyway, after the war was over, we flew back across the Atlantic, and that's when I'm navigating it across the Atlantic, to Iceland, to Greenland, to Labrador, and we assembled. We were going to assemble in Tampa, Florida, and then go train in B-29s and go to the Pacific. And I'm out at Paso Grillo Beach, and by the way, I looked across, and there's Sergeant Joe DiMaggio, who's over there too, just having a drink, and I didn't make a fool of myself, but I, of course, blinked, and I think he knew I knew who he was. Anyway, the A-bomb was dropped, and suddenly they said, okay, you can stay in or get out. And I decided, well, I should go back and go to college. So I went to visit a buddy in Louisiana, and Northwestern State at Natchitoches was having a refresher course. And so I went there and found, heck, I could get a math degree by end of 47, because I'd had credit from Clemson, and then Morningside College. And so I got a math degree and went to Colorado U in graduate school. And my buddies kept coming through that were still in the Air Force with all a new car. So I got a letter one day and said, would you like to be recalled to active duty and go to be a nav radar bomb instructor? Yes. So then I went back in and went to California. And from California, I came back to Ellington as a nav radar bomb instructor. And I made captain at that time, and I had a class I was supervising training, and they had the prettiest girls I've ever seen. They were the go-getters. And I said, Patton, when you get back, I want you to introduce me. And so the first one was the one I married, which not Paige, because I lost my first one to cancer. But anyway, and it turned out her uncle from Louisiana was commander of the Air National Guard flying A-26s. So therefore, she was gung-ho Air Force, and they opened up the chance if you were under 30 and hadn't been to pilot school. They were trying to build up. They didn't know how long the Korean War would last. So away I went, and that was a piece of cake, because I was a captain, and I went to Monroe, and then I came to Bryan Air Force Base, and I was the ranking student officer, i.e. the Corps commander. And on the parade at I have a movie of it that my late wife took, where I'm up front. We'd had a pretty good party the night before too, and so by that time, then the war ended. So instead of going to F-86s at Las Vegas, they had this program. They said, go to Ellington, and then you're going to go to San Antonio for train for spy planes, the U-2s. I thought, hey, that's a new thing to get in on. And they didn't have any slots for instructor. I wanted to be an instructor so I could build up time in a hurry. Instead, I went to Ellington, and then they said, wait a minute, we need more experienced pilots, so you can't go. So then I ended up going to Nashville for a month, and then overseas to Newfoundland as a transport pilot, which I thought was an insult for a fighter pilot, but it turned out to be. I had some of the greatest old pilots, and we had was service in the distant early war line, better called the DEW line, across Canada and Greenland. And so we were like passengers, mail and cargo. They had scheduled routes. You flew a blue uniform with a tie, and went into the Greenland places, including Thule, which was high adventure to go way up there. You'd come out of the night and here it looks like a huge city.
Now you're still a navigator?
No, I'm a pilot
You're
now.
a pilot now.
See, I'm now a pilot. See, I'd gone through fighter training at Bryan Air Force Base. And so from there, I got a tremendous amount of good experience. And so when I came back, I went to...
what year are we now?
We're now in 1956, let's see, 56, I finished my tour in the Arctic, came back, and I had a wife and two little ones, and by that time, so I was stationed at Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I came down here to A&M because I'd gone through pilot school and I knew the Aggies and I loved them fly their wing or vice versa. They were good. I liked the Aggie spirit. So I dropped by the commandant's. Well, I had a friend, Fred, and what was it? Fred Smith and Odette. Fred and Odette. Odette was very active around here, by the way. They both died a while back, but still, she picked up the phone and said, Pelly, Colonel Dittman was, I got a man over here I think you'd like to have in your detachment. So she said, come on over. So when I came over and talked to him, and he picked up the phone and called the Air University and said, hey, I got a guy, captain over here I'd like to have on my staff. So with that being the case, that was great. So then I instructed for 4 years, but Colonel Ed Gregory was the PAS there. Colonel Dittman finished his tour. And I started thinking about the future and started freshening my math. And we kept sending our students off to advanced training, or they could stay here. And General Schriever, our 4-star Aggie, who was Mr. Space Program, said, Higgins, and one of my cadets was Dr. Boeing, Cadet Boeing, who'd been Deputy Corps Commander, to write Pat, and he said, why don't you get another degree and I'll put you in the space program. So then I did get a chance at the age of 34 to start at Aggieland in industrial engineering. And I got that degree, and from there I went to 1 year at in Massachusetts, just outside Boston. Really, it's Boston, and I took 2 courses there at Harvard. Good old Fight Fiercely Harvard.
Yeah, Harvard.
But anyway, it was taught, and also a course over at the Air University in System Program Management Staff Officer. So from there, I went to LA in the space program, and that was really, and finished my career there. But I could have extended and gone to Vietnam in F-4 fighters, but I would like to have done it if I didn't have a family, but I decided we were going to retire at the age of 42. I'm in the space program, so I came straight to Houston and hired on with Northrop. Brown and Root Northrop had a joint venture, and then it turned it all over to Northrop. So I finished my 15 years there and came up here.
Yeah.
And that's when Monk Vance, if you remember him, he was a great old Aggie, said, hey, we got a program going over at A&M in the Kleberg building. I said, I'm a professional engineer. And I did have my PE rating by then. He said, no, I think you'll like it. Just try it. So I went over, and it was fun. And so I'm still doing it. Today I work in the mornings, and I'm the senior guy now by attrition.
Right.
The others are gone or died or left. And so we test whatever they put before us. Now, the president of A&M at one time, I didn't know her, but she was in that building as head of animal science.
Right.
And now she moved on up to higher levels.
Yeah.
And Dr. Cross, who is one she appointed to a higher level, had got this program going on testing.
Right.
We've tested all kind of things. Rice, the best, of course, is steak, like for Outback. At that time, they invited community people. You should have been invited to that. I know the district attorney came and the county attorney, Kaboviak, isn't it? Yeah, who's now retiring or something. So anyway, that's what I'm now doing.
Yeah.
And still, I discovered the Confederate Air Force. I lost my wife to cancer in '75, and her dad had been head of Baylor Medical School, OB-GYN. And I had the finest doctors in Houston, but breast cancer is a booger. It's better now, that is the treatment.
Yeah, right.
But we had the finest doctors, and so one of the ladies that were looking after my wife when I'd be gone, and it was wonderful because Northrop said, you just come in when you can. I had a 13-people staff. We were procuring stuff for the space program. And so when I lost her, after about a year, this lady said, I think I know a girl you might like. I said, well, I'm not looking. There she is.
Yeah. Because
Paige was the one, and she was teacher at St. John's, the upscale school there in River Oaks.
Right.
And so...
how long have y'all been married?
77, we got married in the summer of 77, so that's 31 coming up.
Yeah.
And so that's a bit long. My late wife and I were married 22 years. So life went on, and then she had this stroke in 5 years ago in March. And across the street, we have two doctors, both have little boys, Gloria Jean Mays, who's a cardiologist, and Nancy.
I know Dr. Mays. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Nancy Burdish, who's, and of course, Mark Cecilio was up the road, and his wife's school nurse.
Right.
So when she had the first stroke, it was a minor. When I called Mark and his wife said, get her into St. Joe's. So we rolled her to there, and she looked like we were home free. And then I found her about... and Gloria Jean Mays had told me, if you ever have a problem, call me. So when I found her on the floor the second time, Gloria was there in 3 minutes and said, oops, a big one. So we rolled her there. And she's been, her mind is better than mine. Her memory's like perfect, but her body's weak. Yeah. And I'm a good caregiver. I can do what she tells me, or we've even got some exotic dishes where I put this and say a little of that. And so that's, but in the meantime, I had, when Paige and I got married, I was still keeping up my pilot license, just flying light planes, and I said, I was at this meeting tonight and had people from the Confederate Air Force, and they even have a B-17. Paige said, you ought to join. Mm-hmm. The next day I joined, and I found that weekend we went to New Iberia, and I was hooked. When I got about halfway, they said, come up and fly it, Ed. And so I flew it all the way over until the landing, of course. And on the way back, I'm clear on the base leg, and I said, I don't think I ought to try to land it. We were going to let you. But from then on, I've been...
How long ago was that?
And that was in 1979. Uh-huh. And so I've been a member still. And, you know, we had an Aggie wing of it here, but it folded because we kept losing people. And finally, I'm a member of 4 other units, the Waco unit, but still the basic one is the West, both the Gulf Coast wing, but the B-17's been out for maintenance for 5 years. Mm-hmm. Whereas I'm also a member of Lone Star Flight, which has one. Yeah. And I can go on that one if I ever get, but I don't really go away from home overnight. In fact, I have not been away from home overnight since the fall of 2002. Mm-hmm. I have been here every night, either taking care of, if I fly anywhere, I go out and back the same day. Right. And so I've been flying, Colonel Everett Laird has an A-20, I mean not an A-20, anyways, the plane picture over there, it's the one that they use for the same. And still have a medical. Yeah. I still have a medical, and he doesn't. Yeah. So that's the best of both worlds, that I get to fly that plane and log all the time, and we split the time. But really, he usually makes the landing, but I can land it from the back seat. Yeah. So.
So you still fly.
So I flew Saturday 1 hour.
Did you?
In my Air Coupe.
Yeah.
Now the Air Coupe is a plane that was designed by Professor Fred White. Gene Benson brought him in to design the crop duster planes, better known as the aerial application aircraft, which is the technical name, one that would have an enclosed cockpit instead of a surplus Stearman or Cessna. It would have enclosed cockpit to keep from ingesting all that air conditioning, and it would take a lot of, if you crashed it, it was rugged. And so, but he had designed this plane called the Air Coupe in 1943, let's see, 40, when was it? 40, let's see, when did they produce? Yeah, it was designed in 1943, handmade, and the Army Air Corps bought one to use as a test bed for rockets. So they'd only made 3 of them at the time. And so it was the first U.S. manned rocket airplane that Professor Fred White had designed. So the Air Coupe, then they had another one designed called the YO-55, and that's what I have. Right. Mine is painted like that. And we're going to have a fly-in here not this weekend, but the following Saturday, weather permitting. And all the Air Coupes in the world are invited. We'll probably 15 or 20, or none if the weather's bad. Right. Because the Air Coupe has integrated controls. Now, one of the many things, I'm an inveterate joiner, and I'm a member of the Aircraft Owner and Pilots Association. And by the way, Paige gave me that airplane as a birthday present. Paid $4,500 for it, and I thought she bought me a model. And I said, we can't afford that. Guess what it's worth? $25,000 now.
Oh, wow.
It was a good investment.
Yeah.
But my buddies I have changed the engine. I have had good buddies out at Turbiville and at Easterwood to do what I can't do.
So where do you keep it?
It's Coulter.
At
It's
Coulter?
in the hangar at Coulter.
Yeah.
And you knew Bill McLeod, I'm sure, of course, with Texas Voting. In fact, I'm in his old hangar.
Is that right?
Because he, of course, passed on.
Yeah.
And before that, Guy Davis was another one.
Yeah.
In fact, I led the missing man formation for Guy when he passed.
I'll be darned.
And you can do a flight where you have the guy peel off, or you can do a single ship where you fly over the place going from west to east, do a 9270 and come back and fly over it going west and waggle the wings goodbye.
Yeah.
And so I've done several of those. Gene Holligan was one that December a year ago I did at a little church in the country, and I went out on the land the day before to make sure I knew where I was.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm still flying, and I passed the physical. I don't even need these glasses here. Are photomatic.
Did Dr. Cooper do that?
No,
the physical?
Dr. Ann Wild.
Oh, Dr.
Ann made these.
Oh,
But and I went to James Cooper, and then the head of Continental Airlines Medical Department, Hal Conwell, feelings were hurt because I wasn't coming to him.
Oh.
So I've been going to him, and I can pass.
Dr. Cooper's my doctor.
Yeah, well, Cooper's fine too. I'd gone to him for 2 different physicals. Every 2 years you need one, and so then I went to Dr. Conwell he's the head of Continental Airlines Medical Department. You sit there with all these captains, fill out your forms. But my body, had an incentive because I love to fly to keep going good, and all the numbers have been good. And in fact, I don't need these glasses if it's sunny.
Right.
I can see 20/20 in the map and everything.
How old are you?
I'm just hit 83.
83.
Not only are most of my friends not flying, they're not even here. They're gone. And that's one of the things I need to do. I was wondering about getting this or postponing it. I'm trying to do Christmas cards, and I know the Harry Claggett, who was, when we had the joint venture at Northrop, he was the Northrop president, and he has moved. He lost his wife like I did, and found another nice lady, but he lives in Kentucky. I haven't sent him the Christmas card and saying, by the way, Harry Hutchins' wife Helen, whom you knew, passed away, in case you didn't know it. But she was 92 and a good run for 92, 50. Yeah, she 2015. She'd be 93.
Yeah.
92 to 93. So anyway.
Well, on your 6 combat missions over Europe, you came out quite lucky on those.
Right. The first one. Let me see. I've got the rundown. Where's the
Were there any times that you weren't certain it was going to come out good?
Let me find where's my list? There it is.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, yeah. Here. The first mission was to Brandenburg. All of these were 1,000 planes. The second was to Royan, France. Now, when we got up and we said, France? Yeah, they have 100,000 Germans blocking the port of Bordeaux. The French need to get that open so they can replenish the country. We're going to have a joint effort. You're going to go in and let's see. So we went in. Let's see. I think I put on the back. Yeah. We couldn't believe it when they said we were going to bomb in west longitude. But if you look at Bordeaux, it's 3 or 4 degrees west of the central meridian. Anyway, we arrived at Target. Oh yeah, that was where we had regular bombs, and a group of B-24s flew underneath us, and we got 4 of them. Let's see. Yep, you can see the bombs underway there, and the planes below. And I remember I was pounding the navigator, the bombardier, and said, "Hey, we gonna drop?" "Yeah, but the group says drop." So drop we did. And I later ran across one of those guys, and he grabbed me by the throat and said, "Well, I had lost 2 buddies there." I said, "Well, I was yelling, no, don't drop."
So this picture was taken out of your B-17?
Yeah.
Your plane?
Uh-huh.
Wow. How fascinating.
Yeah, we all carried a camera.
Yeah. Did you take this picture?
Oh, no.
No.
The radio operator,
did
had
that.
he was in the room where he picked a place on the floor up and charged it. And
so the target was right here, right at the beach here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the second one, let's see. Three. Let's see. Oh yeah, the third one. The second day we went in, we used jellied gasoline. It was, and it was napalm, but we didn't know that. It was like watermelons, and they went all over the sky. They didn't have fins. We just dumped it and set one hellacious fires down there. But we called it jellied gasoline because they hadn't named it napalm. And of course, that was sort of a tryout for what they were going to use in burning out Japan.
Right.
Yeah, it looked like watermelons that tumbled all over the sky and dropped. One plane had a leak, and they told them, "Do not use your radios. Be careful, because on Spark, and he's a bomb." But they all made it. Let's see. And the fourth one is when they got ready we had the first time we lined up and had intervalometer setting where we had frag bombs. On this one, on the fourth day, we had general purpose bombs. The French Navy was off the coast ready to invade, and we were supposed to soften up the bunkers. As soon as we cleared, they put ashore a landing force. It was really high adventure seeing them off as they invaded off by Bordeaux.
Yeah.
And we had really, all the Germans had was light stuff. You'd see the little flashes, but they couldn't nearly get above 20,000.
Yeah.
So that was a piece of cake. You worried more about mid-air collision, which unfortunately did occur. Let's see, number 5 is this is where I had Dresden.
This is 5?
And at Dresden, and this is where I've got my log of the Dresden. I had it looking at it about a month ago, and I'll be damned if I can find it. It's in here or upstairs I think it's somewhere in here. But we saw there were 500, I estimated, railroad cars, and they were all heading east. And we thought that there was supposed to be a redoubt, Hitler's redoubt, that was going to hold out, and we'd get our 35 missions bombing the place out.
Right.
Instead, what was really in those things was undoubtedly Jews. They were hauling people to do them in, the bastards.
Oh my goodness.
And so, unfortunately, I didn't even know they had the whole, nobody ever informed us. I know the British and French really knew that was happening, but Roosevelt, but it was not known.
No.
And so probably they came in and shot the heck out of those cars because they were railroad cars.
Right.
But in doing this, as we got in there, we ran into clouds and we lost an engine. It ran away, and so as we came out of there,
this was in your Dresden mission?
At the Dresden mission, we came out of the weather, and just as we came out, here's another plane like that. Well, look here. This guy Clark was on the Veterans of the Valley, had almost a mirror image where he went to Hunter Field to pick up a new plane. He flew across the Atlantic this way, but he ended up getting 32 missions because they were able to get off at Greenland. We couldn't get off.
Yeah.
But when they came out, he came out, had a chance, and several planes collided on our bombing run. And we didn't, of course. I'm here. But as we came out, it was just the luck of the draw.
Yeah.
And so then we slid out, and we started, and my pilot said, "Give me a heading to Switzerland."
Yeah.
And so I said 240, just as a little south of due west. And so then they started fiddling with the engine, and it began to get partial power.
Yeah.
And so then we began to join up with other airplanes. They were all over the place. And as we joined up, one guy said, "Okay, I'm lead." And so we ended up with 12 ships. Nobody was from the same unit.
Right.
Because the tails were different. So anyway, we got partial power. So then he said, "Give me a heading to England." Okay, that's 280. And so we continued on. But as we were doing that, here comes a lone B-17 from the north. Now, you Germans had some that were sneaky. There was a group that had American airplanes painted, and they'd get up and then level you off.
Mm-hmm.
So we shot bursts across the nose, and they turned and went back. So undoubtedly it was one of those that were going to decide if they could sneak in and shoot a bunch up.
Yeah.
So I think I've got that written on one of those.
Do you know Mr. Clark?
No, I haven't.
I do.
Good, because I meant to call him up and say, "Hey, you and I were mirror image."
Well, I can put you with him because I know his son. His son is John Clark, who's a real estate guy here in town. You see his signs all around.
That's been one of my many things to do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll call John and tell him that I know you and get you all together.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Yeah.
Because we were, it was the exact thing, and we both missed it.
Right.
But several.
Yeah, well, he had a mission over Dresden just a couple of months before you did.
No, this was the same mission. He may have had another mission. Yeah, he must have.
Well, it says February.
Yeah, no.
Of 45.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He got 32, so he would have been on that other mission too.
Right.
He would have been. Yeah, that earlier mission, because Dresden was way down there. That was a long. I think it was over 8 hours.
Yeah.
And when you came back.
Yeah.
You were really bushed, even though I was only 20 years old.
Yeah, I'll bet. These pictures are just fascinating.
I know. At the end of the war, they had a bunch of money in the various clubs, and so they used that money to produce this book and to send us our strike photos. And one thing that was high adventure here, we had a parade for General Doolittle.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so they said, "Who knows how to march?" And Higgins, you do, don't you? You're an ROTC. I said, "Yeah, I guess so." So where am I? I'm in. All right, let's see. I'm a flight lieutenant. That's not it. That's Colonel Carmine, and I think I have a line. Me. I got all these captains and majors back in there, and I'm a flight lieutenant.
Right there.
As a second lieutenant still.
Because you knew how to march.
And do the old eyes right. So that was really great.
Is this your plane or?
That was one I flew on, one mission, and I liked it. It had a steel plate underneath.
Yeah.
But one thing I noticed, I did not put the number of the damn airplane on there. I can't believe it. I have a copy of the log that is not filled in. Let's see, where is that thing? Oh, this is a kind of a now. See, I have one somewhere that. See, it even has the plane number and all that.
Yeah.
And that's the one I cannot find.
Your logbook.
I'm wondering, did I dream it one night? I'm a very vivid dreamer, but I'm sure I looked and I could see it said in the remote 500 railroad cars pointing east.
Right. So you flew up here.
Yeah, well, I was right there. The bombardier sat here.
Bombardier.
That's one of my guns.
Right.
I had a gun on either side, which I never.
Where'd you look out of?
Right through the window, the little window there.
I see.
Because the Germans were doing head-on attacks.
Okay.
If they came in from the tail, everybody just zapped them because you could shoot directly. If you had 36 planes all flying, and a bot coming in from the rear, he had it.
So would the bombardier operate these guns?
He operated the turret. It was a remotely controlled turret.
Right.
Now, I was
trained.
You
operated this gun.
Yeah, and there was one on the other side.
Right.
Too. Now, if
But you were just on one side.
Yeah.
There was another one on the other side.
Right, exactly. I could run from one side to the other because the pilot would be directing fire. He'd say, "Coming over at 3 o'clock, coming over at 7."
But you operated both guns.
I could run, not at the same, of course. I
Yeah.
could grab one
Right.
and grab the other.
Right.
And the bombardiers, of course, the remote control target, like the ball turret and the upper local, all those were much better. They had a gun sight that was a reticle projected.
Yeah.
And so I just had, it would have been a luck if I ever got one.
Yeah.
But since I'd been through gunnery school, I knew how to do it. And so this crew chief was one we really loved.
Yeah.
He had put extra reinforcement around the. Well, anyway, so basically that was my war.
Yeah.
And it was high adventure in a short period of time. And then, like I say, after I did my career as both in the Arctic and then in the space program, that was also a different way in high adventure. And I got
what exactly did you do in the space program?
Well, production and procurement. And I would put together, because I was an engineer as well, when we had input to make a bid, I would end up with a book that thick that we would present to NASA and whoever our other competitors were.
Right.
But we got sole source after we got there for a while because we were so well known and doing such a good job. But I know one time I had to have something by the morning, so I just stayed out at NASA. And 3 o'clock I went over and cushions and got a couple hours sleep. And when my boss came in, he was ready to go to our secretaries to type it all up. And we never lost a contract when I was there.
Yeah.
It was, of course, that was high adventure too, during those early days of space.
Right.
When I know at one time when we had the mission with the rendezvous with the Russians, where they were going to rendezvous with us,
right.
and we would shake hands across their vehicle to ours. We had something that didn't work, a latch. So there was a company in California called the Bertia Corporation, and I called them and I said, "Can you fix that latch?" "Right, we'll have a jet fighter bring it in to you." And a guy in the back seat got it in, landed at NASA. They rushed it down. We put it on. It worked perfectly. So otherwise, the Russians would have, if it wouldn't fit.
Yeah.
And that was in the training, not before it was going in the air. We had our mock-up there, and it worked. So that was another. And I know when we had the one mission went up and the shield didn't cover the vehicle, so they ended up. We ended up again. I had a guy flying from Buffalo, New York, or someplace that had the right kind of a cover. They could then send a vehicle up, and it would rendezvous and fix that cover. Otherwise, it was going to be too hot.
Yeah.
So
wow.
It was just.
So your service was started when and ended when? How long were you in the service?
All right, it started in August of 1943, and I retired 1 May 1967.
Right.
However, that was military service.
Right.
I had a break in service, but I was active in the reserve all along.
Right.
The time from 1 January 46 until August of 49, I was very active in the reserve.
Right.
And so when I went back in 49, and I got credit because I was actually flying and ready to be called back in. And when they offered me a chance, I was ready to go back, and I was so glad I did, because then I was able to go to pilot school, and that opened up. Now navigators can command up to 4-star general.
Right.
But at those days you had to be a pilot.
Yeah.
And so I was just trying to be in that area. But of course I got into the space program my last 4 years of my career, and then 15 at Northrop at NASA. Only I was now with the industry. The same people I'd been working with, I said, "All right, you government people, we're going to beat you down and get more profit."
Yeah.
Which was, we all understood each other. And we had tested those tiles. I know there was Bill Averett, who was an Aggie, and he was in the and he had a son up here. In fact, he moved up here and was in a nursing home for many years. But I remember Bill bringing me one of those tiles that we had tested under certain, if you hit it with this or if you burned it with that. And we knew they were fragile. But in the same way on the O-rings, we knew those big, and it's not something like that. It's a great big O-ring, but it's got to fit. And usually, if it's warm enough, it just the heat generated from the takeoff is enough to make it fit. Unfortunately, that day with those icicles hanging on it, it didn't get to close.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe when I saw they were getting ready to launch. And I went to the bathroom, and I came back. I was up here by then, and I could see stuff all over the side.
Yeah.
I said,
"Oh, that
shit."
was so sad.
The famous 4-letter word.
Oh yeah.
I knew exactly what had happened.
Yeah.
Of course, when the thing came in on landing, now we inspect them and can repair them. And we had even had it, some projected, so we'd have repair kits. Well, they were working. We just looked when that one was re-entering up over Texas, and suddenly that foam had knocked holes in it, and it was just enough heat to get in there. Now, they... I think the latest one that went up, they had to do a little patch or something.
Yeah.
The guys know how to do it.
Yeah, they gotta do
it's
that.
an elastic and everything.
Right.
You just you can't have a hole where the heat gets in.
Well, tell me about your family.
Yeah.
You have kids? And...
Yes, I have 2 kids, and my wife has 2. All are Aggies.
Okay.
And I even have a granddaughter who has presented me with 3 great-grandchildren, my number 1 grandchild. And her husband is a Navy chief controller on the Ronald Reagan, the state-of-the-art aircraft carrier.
And they're stationed in,
he's my
your
grandson-in-law. Right. My number 1 and there's the the daughter and the great-grandchildren up there.
Yeah.
And of course that is Page's uncle, who was her grandfather. I mean, Judge Page, he was a state senator
who raised her,
and raised her, and she'd get to see her dad now and then. He was an outstanding geologist and developed fields in South America.
So he was Page's grandfather?
That was Page's grandfather, Judge Page, and she lived in a real fancy house there in Bastrop that sold recently for $500,000, and she had sold it for $20,000 when she inherited it.
So his last name was Page?
Page, P-A-G-E.
Okay.
And he was a state senator, judge, and a leading citizen in Bastrop. And of course I didn't know him because he had died. But anyway, back to mine.
So this was a maternal grandfather? Or
let's see.
Or was your wife's name Page?
Wilson? No, that was her maternal.
Okay.
Because she was a Wilson.
Okay.
Page Wilson.
I was going to say because her name would have been Page.
Yeah. No. Back to my family. I had 2 daughters, and Jenny was number 1, and she presented me with
great grandchildren.
Let's see. The daughter, Dottie. Dottie.
Yeah.
And she lives in Katy,
and
a great school. And then she also, let's see, the other daughter is Cynthia, and she lives in the Woodlands.
Right.
Now, Jenny had a outstanding record in floriculture, but then she got married and all that. And Cindy had a degree in finance, and then got married. And that marriage broke up. She came back and got her MBA, and she lives in Woodlands and married to a guy who's an oil tank driller. And but they lost 2 babies at birth. One at birth and one Dr. Cooley, friend of Dr. Wills, operated on his heart and he died that night. But so they haven't had any more children. They shouldn't. That's too traumatic. But Jenny had not only Dottie, but she had Mary and Eric. And Eric is my grandson, and who lives in Los Angeles, and he has an MBA from A&M. And his wife was from Katy, and she also got her MBA at the same time up here. And they went to California, where his wife has what is it? When you're getting another degree. Anyway, she's getting a PhD in finance at Southern Cal. Well, Eric went out there with her, not having a job, And when I was in the Southern California A&M club, when I was still in the military, they at the end of the meeting say, "Anybody need a job?" And if somebody said, "Yeah, I would," or "I got a cousin," okay, have them at my office. Well, I told you, go out there and go to the Southern California A&M club. So after about a couple of months out there, nothing happened. So he went there, and they said at the end of that, and he said, "I say, be at my office at 8 in the morning." He was there at 7:30. Got hired, had 3 promotions already. He's sharp. Katie is good school.
Yeah.
And he was an outstanding athlete. That was one thing I was irked about. He was the #1 athlete at St. Edwards. He couldn't get. He wanted to come to A&M, but he wanted to play baseball. And he was hit with power. He was a catcher. And Tom Chandler passed him by. He said, "Well, we got a all conference," but that guy ended up going to pros, and the job would have been there.
Oh my goodness!
And the majors wanted to sign him, but he really didn't want to go that route.
Yeah.
Because a smart catcher he runs the team really. But anyway, so that was my 2. Now Paige's was married to Jim Kelly, and that marriage broke up. But Kelly's a big donor up here, and he was class of '52, and they had Becky and Jimmy, and Becky was married to Jacob Patterson, who was a doctor of Bracewell Patterson. Now it's Bracewell Juliana law firm, but their marriage broke up. But she has 2 children, and one's the one over there. They're coming here to A&M, who's in the ROTC and Eagle Scout. And Becky is an outstanding teacher. She had one time she went to Washington being honored for being a good math teacher. And they're coming down here at the 23rd. But anyway, and they have things for future students that he's going to be getting. And his grandpa from Chapel Hill will come up and help. But anyway, then Jim Kelly Jr. Is really sharp. That's a picture of him and his wife over there. And he is an oil landman. And he's in Laredo, and he's done so well. He's got people working for him, and that's a beautiful lady, his wife. And they have 2 little girls.
Oh my goodness!
One of them is named for Paige, Caitlin Page.
Oh, good.
And he is really sharp. He went to Lloyd's of London, which is like the Harvard Business School, only more prestigious. And for a year, and I was going to go over. And that's when my daughter from the Woodlands lost a baby. We were all set to go to when he was still over there, and my other daughter called and said, "Cindy's in trouble." And sure enough, she did lose the baby.
Goodness. That's so sad.
At birth. But
so do you have any? Do you have any other pictures? I'd like to borrow these just for the day and scan them, and then I'll bring them back to you when we do the show.
Right. You want to take the book here and all that?
Yeah, I'd like to look at it.
You can scan through it just as long as the stuff is there. So I guess the main thing would be my
bombardment group. So this was your group here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's the mission. I was on my first mission.
And this was actually your mission. This
an actual picture that appeared in Life magazine as well.
Is that right?
And I've got a color picture of it somewhere. But the office, because when Paige was so good before she was working at Glenn for Henry Hill, and I mean, you know Henry, and
I just did a show with Henry
last night you had a good friend of mine, John Anderson.
John Anderson, yeah, that show was done last year. That was a repeat show.
When are you going to have John Henry Hill on?
That'll be
or John Happ.
John Happ is this coming weekend.
Oh, good, because I 2 weeks ago I said, "Damn, here's it Sunday night," and I missed it.
Yeah, John Happ will be this weekend, and then I think Henry Hill will be 2 weeks from this weekend.
Yeah. Well,
I just taped Henry Hill the other day.
If you want a really big picture.
Wow.
I never did frame it, but if you want to.
Is that your plane, or that's just a B-17?
No, that's my.
That's your plane?
It's one of the planes I flew in.
Yeah.
976, a bit of lace, which which was a famous Steve Canyon cartoon.
Right.
And that was a single ship just on the practice.
Right.
So,
so you flew in this plane, yeah.
I have flown in that plane.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if I flew one of the missions. You know, I can't believe that I didn't write down the missions. As a pilot, you always do that.
That's a great. I'm gonna borrow this and take a picture of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
if you wanted to do that,
I'll do that. I'll take a picture of it.
Oh, another picture.
Yeah.
When in the Confederate Air Force, when Bob Hope came, we made him an honorary colonel, and I am presenting him this cap.
Oh, right.
And
I wanna borrow that.
Bob said, of course, here is a picture when I was in training at Bryan, and I was student aerodrome officer, and that's Joe Bardner, who is a good friend, and he's deceased. This Mr. Shube, my instructor, that was a Frenchman, and this, I believe, was a Belgian.
Yeah.
And this one.
And this is when you were at Bryan Air Force Base?
Yeah, getting that was a piece of cake. I love flying, and I could, by the way, when I came back here to A&M as an ROT instructor and was flying out of this one was taken at Spence Field, Moultrie, Georgia. Moultrie, Georgia. Just across the road from Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter's?
I had no idea that with little old planes that was a future president. So yeah, that I don't have the picture of.
Yeah.
I think most of the time at Bryan, my wife took movies of me, or I took movies doing acrobatics and all that good stuff.
Right.
But I could get a plane when we were flying out of Waco. When they closed Bryan Air Force Base, could go anywhere in the world as long as I was back by 8 Monday.
Right.
So I went all over the country, and the only state I missed was, of course, Alaska, Hawaii, and Wisconsin. But I later went to the air show at Wisconsin. Anyway, you want to take any of those or not?
Just to keep them all together. Okay. I might not use all of them, but just to keep everything together in this book.
That way it's organized.
Yeah.
And this Clark thing.
Yeah. I need to get. He's real hard of hearing, I believe, and so I haven't had him on the show.
There's the big thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to take that. This is wonderful. What a wonderful service. Is it still okay for Thursday afternoon?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I'm not working in the afternoon.
At 2:30.
I did cancel my dog's
thyroid
exam this afternoon, but I'll line that up.
Reschedule?
It's just any time.
Yeah.
Do you know Dr. Bonnie Beaver over at A&M? She's a wonderful lady.
Yeah.
And she is.
Yeah.
I have this Weimaraner that's a wonderful guard dog for my wife.
Yeah.
If she knows you're okay, or she would be barking. She can tell that.
She knows when.
And that's where she sleeps half the time.
Oh my goodness.
When my wife first had right after a stroke, I slept down here, but she can go upstairs, take her bath, or shower. I always sort of make sure I'm here. And
sure.
But I'm more liable to fall than she is.
Are there somebody here, like when you leave, to take care of her?
No, but Randy Matson's wife over here,
right.
And it used to be Wayne Starks over there, but then both of them are gone. But Gloria Jean Mays is across the street,
right across the street,
or Nancy. But then the other one is Paula Van Domley. Dr. Van Domley was a Shakespeare prophet. So between her and Margaret and Clay Camps, I've had wonderful neighbors. And Gladys Taylor. So, and Jerry Maffey over there. Who's sort of far out.
Right.
But
Thursday we'll start taping about 2:30. So if you could be there about 2:15, and we're at KAMU.
Yeah, right.
You know, we're right there on campus.
I used to be at the KAMU pilot anytime. Wait a minute, you're at the 15. Wait a minute.
This KAMU on campus.
Oh, the one up here.
On the campus of A&M.
Now, I used to be able to park on the corner up there. Where do you park? I could park over at the Clayton Williams Center.
Yeah, but then you'd have to walk a long way. No, just come in there onto Houston Street, which is that's the street that comes off of George Bush.
I was thinking I was going down to Channel 2.
No.
No, yeah.
No,
that's
you
right.
mean Channel
You're
3
on Channel 4. 450.
Yeah, we're on KAMU. If you just go into campus there on Houston Street, that's the street there that's between the former students building and the foundation building. KAMU is that one-story building that's right on your left.
Is it the one that's always been the same place?
Yeah.
Because I'm a good friend of Penny Cents.
Okay.
We usually, but they used to have a parking place right there, and now there's a fountain.
Now it's all about.
So where do you park?
If you go go past the building.
Yeah.
And turn left immediately into the parking lot. Go past the building, turn left right there, and then look immediately off to your right. And here, it'd be best.
And I do have handicap parking too, which is handy.
Oh, okay. Well, then you could probably park anywhere you want.
Well,
then right there.
I'll see.
Yeah, but I'll tell you where the there's something I can draw on here.
Oh, yeah, I got a little. Everything works real good, but the knees. And Jake Patterson